think that a lot of people will get value out for their teams, their organizations, their customers. So let me talk about flow metrics. And this is going to be a really quick introduction to flow metrics. It's going to be a little bit interactive. So if you've got a mobile phone or a cell phone, you're more than welcome to go onto your mobile or just another tab in your browser and go on menti.com and punch in that number at the top that you're seeing, which is 35392494. So if you go at that address, menti.com, and you type in that number, you'll be able to interact with us and give feedbacks on some questions I'll be asking. So as Sam was saying, who am I? Well, in a nutshell, I'm a professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org since 2011, if I'm correct. I've been also a professional Kanban trainer since 2021, 10 years later. And I've got about 7 years of experience with flow metrics, at looking at charts with teams, organizations. So looking at all that data, I believe I've got some experience that I can share with everybody. And hopefully that will make you learn, grow on how you could learn use flow metrics in your teams. And I'm also the founder of PaceMkr. I wanted a digital solution that was helping me to visualize those flow metrics. So I just hack in something in a few years. So well, first question for the audience, how many flow metrics do you think there are? If you've read anything about flow metrics, how many metrics do you think there are? Do you think there's only 2 metrics? There are 3 of them, there's 4, or maybe 5. So this could be an opportunity to go on that menti.com website. And if you want to collaborate and share your understanding on all of this, you can go in there and type in the number of flow metrics that you think they are in there. So right now we've got 3 people who have answered. I'm not going to wait until all 16 of you who will have answered, because maybe some are just listening or a bit shy. So, okay, so this is our first questions, and people think there are 5 metrics. Actually, no, there are 4 metrics. So the next question is, based on the 5 metrics that you are seeing at the bottom of the screen or on your mobile, which one isn't a flow metric? So I just gave you half of the answer, which is there are 4 metrics in the flow metrics. Which one in there isn't one? So I've got 3 answers that says velocity. You folks are correct. Velocity is not a flow metric. Cycle time, work in progress, age, and throughput are all flow metrics. All right, so let's go on. What are those definitions so that you folks can be a little bit more habilitated on how to work with them in your team's workflow or organizations? So the first thing that is important is to understand that flow metrics are used to understand the value through your systems, and it's going to enable your teams to have data-driven conversations on continuous improvement. There's a couple of keywords in there that I like. The first one is it's data-driven conversations. Flow metrics are based on the historical data on your team or on your workflow. So if you're moving your cards on your Kanban board every day, those dates are being recorded by your Jira, your Azure DevOps, maybe even your Git projects, and we can extract that data and create those flow metrics. And I believe that it will create a better conversation and sooner conversation with those metrics. And those four metrics, as I was mentioning earlier, are composed of the work in progress, which is the number of items in progress, the age, the cycle time, which is the elapsed time from start to finish, and throughput. So let's look at each one of them and why you should put focus or attention on each one of them. The first one will be the work in progress that we usually use as WIP, as the acronym. Even in French, I'm French speaking and we'll talk about WIP. So the acronym is pretty useful. And what is that metric? It's just looking at the number of items that have started in your workflow, but haven't finished yet. And why would you want to look at that? Well, it's going to help you focus and maybe minimize the context switching that you might have in your teams.
Sorry, Louis. Sorry, what's the number for Mentimeter again? The number for Mentimeter?
Yes, I'll just go back.
Let me just record that someone is asking. 3533. 2494. Carry on. Sorry about that.
No problem. So our next metric, and I actually really like this metric now in a Scrum context, it's the work item age. So this definition or this metric is defined as being the total time or elapsed time from when the item was started up until today. So it's going to be a leading indicator because it's going to tell you if that item is getting too old in your workflow. So compared to estimated hours or velocity, I really like the age as a metric because it can keep you up to date on how long has something been in your process. And why should I look at that metric? Well, I just gave you the answer, but it helps you to facilitate the continuous flow of items. You'll probably now want to have a look on older items that are in your workflow, and maybe that workflow will be called a product backlog. You might want to start looking at your product backlog and the age of the items in there. The third flow metric will be the cycle time, which is like the age of the item, but this time it's when it's complete. So it's, oh, and I'm seeing that there's a wrong copy paste in there. So it's not supposed to be the number of work item finished per unit of time. It should be the elapsed time from when a work item started all the way to it was finished. And I just mentioned it's the elapsed time. So cycle time counts also the weekends or the holidays or whatever stats holidays that you have. So a cycle time will also count the weekends in there. And why do I want to focus on cycle time? Well, it's going to give you a past performance of your team, and it's going to lead you to some continuous improvement by looking at that data, that historical data. And finally, we have throughput, which is, well, then again, I've just messed up on these slides, but throughput is the number of work items that are completed per unit of time. So unit of time could be days, months, weeks. You decide based on the flow of your items. So let's say you've got maybe an operational team or a support team that they close a lot of tickets per day. Your throughput will be probably more focused on a daily status than a weekly or a monthly status. So why would I want to look at throughput? Well, once again, if you're looking at your historical throughput, it could give you an indication of how much items you could deliver in the future. So cycle time gives you ways to improve your system. Throughput will help you on the way or the number of items that you can deliver for a delivery date, for example.
There's a question, Louis. Why would you also include weekends and holidays? And I guess that's for, is it the age?
Age and cycle time are just counting the elapsed time. Some teams now maybe support, maybe some teams are more 24 hours. So that's one reason why I would want to track. The other thing is when I'm engaging, maybe that's different for some listeners, but when I'm engaging with customers, if I tell them that their delivery will be in 20 days or in 30 days, barely there, or I've never seen a customer trying to remove the number of weekends in there. If I say 20 days, they'll just do the math of today plus 20 days. So historically, by experience for me, that measure of just counting the elapsed time has simplified the conversation. There's nothing wrong if you want to put some nuance when you're talking with your customer of saying, well, listen, 30 days, but don't forget there's 2 weekends in there. If you want to put more nuance in that conversation, it's up to you, but it's just easier for that. And also, I believe that with more and more teams that are in different time zones or in different countries where holidays are not at the same dates, well, it gets a little bit confusing of trying to maybe calculate a cycle time with there's those regional differences. So it's just easier for me from my perspective of having elapsed time. It simplifies the conversations, but if you don't like it, there's nothing wrong with trying to put more nuance when you're talking with a customer.
Thank
So if
you.
I go, no, not a problem. And feel free, Sam, to interrupt me if there's other valuable questions like that.
I'm checking the chat. If I see any, I'll let you know.
So some quick wins. If you want to just do a quick win with the flow metrics, maybe the first one is looking at the age of your work item in your product backlog. So this on the left side is an actual screenshot of the age of my work items at one of my customer a few years back, there is 132 items in that product backlog. I haven't counted all of them. I'm just looking at the top of that column, and it says WIP 1 through 32. So it just tells me there's 132 items in there. And the y-axis is the age of those items. So there's a lot of younger items at the bottom. There's a lot of them, but if you start looking, there's 3 items that are older than 500 days, and there's a lot of them that are also older than a full year. So if you want to have or have a quick win or have a quick return on your investment of learning flow metrics, well, you can just pop that up into a conversation with your product owner and having a conversation about refining very old items. Having this view for me has been really positive with a product owner of seeing, well, I've got a lot of old stuff in there. Can I close some of them? And you just attack that column here from top to bottom. And you might even put a rule of if there's anything older than a year, for example, or 200 days, let's have this conversation with the product owner to make sure that there's not stuff lying around in your product backlog.
Yeah. And I ask a question, Louis. So if you look at what you've got there, that's showing like entire backlog. For like day-to-day work, how do you use the age of the work items? What might that mean for a team?
That would be another conversation because that chart that you're seeing here, we would also apply it at the sprint backlog. And I'm going to start saying the sprint backlog workflow, and the same thing for the product backlog workflow. As you extend your Scrum, your sprint backlog, it becomes a workflow. You'll start seeing items aging in there. And same thing for product backlog, going from just a list of ordered stuff, a list of ordered stuff, and you put it as a workflow, you'll see older items aging in there. So maybe not on a day-to-day with that chart, but if you look at your workflows, Sam, there's a lot of conversations in there that you could have.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat. What is the x-axis measuring?
The x-axis is not measuring anything, it's just showing that this is the column called backlog. So if you would have a workflow of 5 columns, you would just have 5 columns in there. And to avoid that all the points are overlapping, they're kind of randomly spread out when they have the same age. For example, there's a few dots in there. There's one that has a dot with a number 6 at 400 days. Well, that algorithm could have maybe spread them out a little bit better so that they could be all around 400.
Yeah. Is that clear though? So for each of the columns on your board, you would have something like this, and then it doesn't want to overlap them, so it's spaced out a little bit. That's correct, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, carry on.
And the last thing I like about this data point here, or this data, is that, well, if I add up the age of all those items, it gives me around 5,000 active days of work. This might not be very meaningful for a product backlog because they're not maybe really active. But if you start looking at your entire workflow, let's say you've got a PMO workflow, project management office workflow, and you start adding or counting all those projects, how much numbers of days they've been active, and you sum them up, you might get to really big numbers of, I'm going to say, 10,000 active days for all your projects, or maybe your product backlog or sprint backlog, you've got 200 days of active work. That might be a more meaningful number when you start multiplying that by a daily rate. Let's say for each active day, it costs your team or your organization $1,000 or £1,000 or whatever value. Well, if you start multiplying those active days with that daily rate, it gives you a big amount or dollar sign, a big amount of dollars or of money. And you can have now a more meaningful conversation with management, with product people about we've got maybe too much stuff going on and it's costing us a lot of money.
Interesting.
The other quick win that you can have is as soon as you pull up your data and you throw it into a analytics tool like a PaceMkr, it's going to give you a new metric called the service level expectation, was actually just using all of your cycle times and using percentile to give you forecast for future work. So in this screenshot, it's telling us that for the next item coming into your process, if you start working on it today, it's going to be completed in 17 days or less with an 85% chance of being completed. So PaceMkr or whatever tool that you're using can take all of your cycle time and create single item forecast. So in a matter of minutes, when your customer will ask you, hey, if you start working on this, when will it be done? You can look at your flow metrics and give him an answer of, I've got an 85% confidence that it's going to come out in 17 days or less. And then you can say, well, that includes maybe a weekend or two, if you want to go into that nuance. But nonetheless, you've got maybe an answer that previously with your Scrum team, you would have to say, well, let me decompose this in hours, or I've got to look at my past velocity. We'll have to do a little bit of story pointing on this. Those conversations go away when you're using flow metrics because you're basing your conversation on historical data.
Question, Louis. Is this metric more meaningful when looking at the lead time and your backlog management? I don't understand that question, Idris. Is that relating to the age of the items or?
Yes, but sorry. So yeah, relating to the work item age. So if we look at it from the product backlog angle, then maybe we should be looking at the lead time rather than the cycle time. I just want to believe.
To make this a quick conversation, I can't thank enough Dan DeConti with his book on this conversation of pick wherever your start point and end point are and call that cycle time. So instead of having lead time and having more confusion on where is that and where is cycle time, where is that, whatever is your start point and your end point, call that cycle time. So sometimes your cycle time will have your focus on your product backlog, and sometimes your cycle time will be a focus maybe in your sprint backlog. So I really like this because it simplifies conversations. There's no lead and whatever time, there's just cycle time, and it's you as you define where is your start point and your end point to take that measure.
Great, great. Another question I was going to ask is regarding the service level expectation. Are you saying that with PaceMkr, you can pull up an item and then say, how long will this item take? Or is it for a set of items in your backlog?
Just for one item. So the cycle time / service level expectation will be focusing on single item forecasting.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Hopefully we get to see this tool at the end.
I'm sorry?
Hopefully we get to see a quick demo of this tool. That would be good.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And if people are wondering, well, how do I estimate now if I'm not using this anymore, if I'm not using story points or velocity? Well, what you're looking at the screen right now will be your new gauge to do estimation. So if you're estimating on something new and you've got this big item here, well, you can have a conversation. This would be a user story or whatever you call it at your workplace. Well, can we do this in 17 days or less? If the conversation is no, well, we can ask the product owner or your customer, would you be comfortable if we take this, but we know it's going to take more than 17 days because it's just a big chunk of work. And the product owner, first of all, will be so happy that you're not talking about story points. You're telling him that in 17 days or more, he'll have this. And then you can say, can you split this in half because it's too big or not? So that service level expectation helps you have that conversation, first of all, in days with your product owner. And then you can say with that product owner, are you comfortable at splitting this into little pieces of value because we would like to respect our SLE? And if not, well, we'll track and we'll know that this is just a big chunk of work. And since you've got constraint in your business, we just can't split this, but we'll track it in another way.
Right.
No other questions?
No questions, no.
Okay, phew. So from my experience with flow metrics and guiding people at using them in their teams, their workplace, that return on investment is pretty high when they start using it, and it gets like lower, it gets like at a stable balance afterward. And the way I explain this is that at first, when they plug flow metrics in their organization, they're going to see issues with their work items. Some of them will be old, the throughput will not be correct, the cycle time will be too high. Those important conversation will show up right at the front. So that's why that in that chart, that line is pretty high, and then it goes down because after a few weeks or a month of using those flow metrics, those key value points are going to get done. And it's just going to be to apply those flow metrics on a day-to-day basis or on a week-by-week basis. And flow will start, I'm not going to say creep in, but maybe set in place, or you'll have those more normal conversation with customers as they'll get more used to having those new conversations.
We've got a question here, Louis. How do we account for the complexity of the task using flow metrics, I assume?
So if we go back here, let's say you've got this big chunk of work here that I'm showing on my camera. It's really complex. I don't know what complex would mean for you, but it's really complex. We just ask the question, historically, can we deliver that thing in 17 days or less? If we're feeling that, no, we've got a lot of thumbs down in our team, well, we can turn back to our product owner or our customer saying, this is going to be really hard to do. It's probably going to be 30 days of work. And then you advise your customer, we should, maybe want to tell him, we'll keep it, that's just one block of work because of complexity, or maybe we can break it down in a few little modules and deliver that value in smaller pieces and hopefully try to respect for each of those chunks of work that limit of 17 days or less. So that's how I would handle more complex work.
Thank you very much. I hope that answers the question, Grace.
One famous quote, and I don't know if it's a famous one, but one that I love a lot is about Daniel Vacanti that said this to me years ago, that flow metrics will help you to ask the right questions sooner. They just create new conversation that people just didn't think of. And if you're doing a lot of traditional agile, Scrum, safe, using a lot of story points, estimating, you'll have some new conversations. So maybe people will be uncomfortable because you'll be bringing up a new perspective on how to look at work. But I believe, and that's why I'm just talking about those metrics for so many years, I believe that they are a really useful conversation. And I'm just not going to stop about talking about them until I retire because there's a lot of value out of these. So when do you think I should not use those items? Well, first of all, if the team changes a lot, so if there's a lot of people are being changed in your team, maybe it's not a good thing to use flow metrics because the productivity of your team, the learnings that you'll have because you're onboarding new people, that might affect your metrics. So maybe if you have a team that is having new members and people are getting moved around a lot, it might not be a good situation to use flow metrics. Same thing if you've got all types of work. Let's say you've got production bugs, you've got maintenance from other systems. If you've got all types of work coming into your team, well, maybe your team is spending so much learning on that new type of work or those new technologies that they can't find a rhythm. They're still always learning and struggling. So there's no good historical data to do metrics or forecasting. So if there's all types of work, maybe it's maybe not a good idea to have flow metrics with your team. And lastly, as I was saying, if those technologies are changing a lot, I don't know, you're an integration team and you're playing with Microsoft Outlook for 3 months, and then you're trying to do an integration with Google, and then you're doing an integration with, I don't know, Salesforce. As you're trying every platform every couple of months, you might be struggling with each technology and you just can't find your rhythm or your balance. So if technologies are changing a lot, maybe flow metrics are not a good a technique for you. But on the other side, maybe just doing that measure, even if it's not a right measure, at least you'll be able to show management or whoever's leading your team of showing that there's so much variability that it affects our predictability. And that might, again, bring a new conversation sooner that you might not have had.
Louis, I've got a question. So with Kanban, right? There is this thing around service classification, different types of work. So how do you manage that when you've got different classes of work on a Kanban board, and then you've got flow metrics which are kind of native to Kanban? How do you navigate that?
So by having two or multiple work item types or classes of items, and I'm not talking about classes of service, I'm just talking about different types of items going into your board. So maybe you've got technical debt, maybe you've got bugs, maybe you've got requests from customers like spikes or proof concepts. And then you might just have your value story that are called user stories. By having those different types of work items, you'll start to have historical data on each type. And each type of work will have its own cycle time / service level expectation. So maybe a bug will have, I'm going to say 3 days or less for being completed, while a user story might take 20 days or less to be completed. So by having those different types of work items, you'll just have different SLE. And when a customer will give you a request or a bug to fix, you'll be able to filter out your data by work item types and give him the answer. Well, because it's a bug, we'll be able to finish this in 3 days.
Right. Great. Thank you very much.
And finally, when should you not use them? Well, if there's no interest from people around you. I mean, if your manager doesn't want to hear, it's not on his radar, if your teammates just don't want to hear about it, if you're just happy of doing what you are doing and there's no issue, no problem, maybe just don't talk about flow metrics. So what would be next steps? If you've enjoyed this, or if I've maybe given you the idea or the interest of looking into this, I can't stress enough how a good, valuable training would help you out. I mean, the PSK from Scrum.org and the AFMS, applying flow metrics for Scrum teams from Pro Kanban, would be my best two choices. The PSK, I find, is a good intermediate class, and the AFMS would be a good expert level class. So if you're beginning with flow metrics, the PSK would be a good place to start. But if you've got a couple of years of experience and you just want to fine tune your skill, the AFMS would be maybe the best place for you. Both classes do offer assessment to get certified also to show that you are mastering that subject. Also, maybe the next step would be to load up your data. So most tool out there can extract your data. So in Azure DevOps, in Jira, or just an Excel spreadsheet, you can just organize your data quite easily and then load it up in, let's say, a PaceMkr to have that visualization of those flow metrics. So if you get trained and you're comfortable with understanding the metrics, a next step for me would be to load that data in. And you can also do it in your own Excel spreadsheet. I mean, all the formulas are already in Excel. After you get trained, you're pretty comfortable at building your own Excel spreadsheet to understand how they work. So it's 35 after the hour. I'm at that point where I want to say a big thank you for your questions and participating with me. If there's any more questions, feel free again to drop them into your mobile. We're at that place where you can just type in questions. You've got the chat also in Zoom, and I'm sure Sam can facilitate those questions until I believe 6 p.m.
All right, great. Any questions for Louis on flow metrics? There's a question. Do you have a favorite report plugin for Jira? Louis, do you want to show the PaceMkr? Are you set up to show us the PaceMkr on how to use it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you drive, Louis. So Chris, Louis built a tool called the PaceMkr, and it's going to try and show us the PaceMkr, which can work for Jira.
Yes, so there is a Jira plugin. I'm not configured to show it live, but it's just installing it with your Jira admin, and you could have the same screen as if you would have it, let's say, as a standalone application. So what you're looking here, you would also have it in Jira, but just think that you would have maybe the widgets, gizmos of Jira, like the search bar at the top. You just have that Jira infrastructure in place. So as I was talking, I'll put this in English. No one wants to read French. So you would have your service level expectation up here, which is built based on all of your cycle time. Here, you've got your filter bar at the top in the gray area. So what do you want to look and your date range? Maybe you want to look at the last 60 days or last 30 days, or maybe per quarter. So let's say I'm looking at the last 60 days of data. And as I think it was, we had a participant talking about lead time and cycle time. This is where you want to define your workflow. So let's say you don't want to look at to-do because your to-do column is like your backlog column. If I remove that, well, my cycle time will get smaller because it's just recording between discovery and done. And then I can filter maybe on a couple of things. Maybe I don't want to look at bugs and technical debt. I just want to look at user stories. So I'll just select user stories, and I set up my user stories take 17 days or less to be completed. And let's say I've got a bug coming in today and my customer wants to know how long a bug will take. Well, based on those 14 work items that I've completed in the past, a bug will take 9 days or less. So this is the value of having different work item types configured in your Jira.
So, Louis, how does this work? Because if it's the bug coming is a massive, massive bug, how does that work? Because it might be a bug that we've never seen before, the unknown parameter here now.
Yeah, probably yes. So you'll get that feedback from developers. Your developers should say, oh, this is going to be easy, or this is going to be massive. So as a Scrum Master or an Agile coach, or if you've got that facilitating role and you've got that metric close by, you can just start by asking that question. Okay, this is a massive bug. Historically, we would do bugs in 9 days or less. Do you folks think that you can resolve that? You get that answer of this is going to be massive. I'm going to investigate for an hour and I'll get back to you. So you get that conversation right away if we can meet that SLE.
Right, right. So if I want to now look at, I've got 40 items in my backlog, when would that be done? Is it a case of just multiplying that number by those 40 items, or how do you do that?
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated. That's where the class, the PSK, or the other one from forkanban.org will help people see that it's not just going to be a throughput. It's going to be another tool called the Monte Carlo simulations that you can kind of see here that it's going to happen in the background. So you've got your forecasting module where you set a date. For example, let's say we've got a project that starts next Monday and it's going to end right before the end of the year, let's say Friday, December 20th. And it's going to tell me just by using my historical throughput that on that date, on Friday, December 20th, I could deliver 45 items with a confidence level of 85%. I'll deliver 40, but with more confidence. So what I love about Flowmetrics is when it's forecasting either one item or multiple items, it gives you a range of possibilities. So that creates new conversation with your business because it tells you, well, if you've had, let's say, you've got a product backlog of 75 items. There you go. 75 items, it tells you that your team can deliver this on next year, right after Valentine's Day. Okay, so let's say we want to bump up that team to maybe 150%. I'm going to have another team and my velocity or my cadence, people will be working twice as fast. Well, even if I'm putting a new team to meet that deadline, I'm still going to deliver that in 2025, a little bit sooner, but still in 2025. So I can create conversation right away of saying, we're not going to meet that deadline for the end of December with 75 items in our product backlog.
Right. Thank you very much. There's a question. Is it plug and play? That's for the Jira. What does that mean? I don't know. Does that mean that can you view it within Jira, or is it going to be a URL outside of Jira?
Oh no, it's plug and play in Jira. You'll be limited to the project PaceMkr, and Jira loads just inside of your project. So if you've got boards, it's just going to give you the boards of your project, and you can look at your data. It's not going to give you nice data. Please be prepared. Your data will be ugly because it might be the first time that you'll be looking at your data with the flow metrics perspective. So just as a word of caution, it's not going to be nice. It's probably going to be ugly.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. There's another question here. Thank you for bringing those questions. We've got about 19 minutes to go. At which phase of the sprint or during which sprint event would you talk about each flow metric with the team?
So, for example, at the sprint planning, I would talk about throughput / Monte Carlo to do forecast for the sprint, how many items we'll be delivering. We can maybe also look at the age of the items, because if you're finishing a sprint, there's maybe some stuff lying around in your previous sprint. So maybe there's some old items that needs to be finished in the next sprint. At the daily scrum, it's this chart here. It's the age / SLE. But once again, taking a class will really help you to understand all the value that you can get from that chart here. The sprint review, once again, we would look at the cycle time and the forecast, because maybe we'll talk about delivery dates at the sprint review. So this would be this forecasting module. And at the sprint retro, we would probably look at this cycle time scatter plot here, that cloud of dots in that chart, to maybe look at outliers, ways of improving that cycle time if it's getting on an upward trend, for example.
All right, great. Thank you very much. I hope that answered your question. Mark has asked, how long should you be looking at collecting data before you will be getting feedback with enough accuracy to be viable? Great question. How much data do you need before you start getting reliable feedback from the data?
So to have it, I'm going to say, to be mathematically reliable, it takes you 12, or you need 12 completed items in there to have a SLE at 85%. If you want a mathematically correct 95%, you would need 40 data points to be completed. So that's why the 85% is a good sweet spot, because in Scrum teams, usually 1 or 2 sprint, you've got those 12 items already completed. At least that's in my experience. So after those 12 data points, you've got enough data to start working on acting if you believe that you should act. Maybe you need more data, but after 12 data points, you would have enough data to act on it.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Louis? Well, thank you very much, Louis. I feel like you've been on a hot seat for a while. Any other questions for Louis? And Louis is actually a PSK trainer and a PKT trainer. So he offers those courses. Have you left a way for people to reach out to you, Louis? Maybe put that in the chat, LinkedIn, or if you have your training scheduled somewhere on a website, please share that as well, so people can reach out to you if they want to, go on any of your courses.
Yeah, LinkedIn would be the best place to find me. There's a Calendly in there, so if you want to book a 30 minutes to talk about how to integrate, connect, I'm free to. I'm always available to look at your data and how to connect.
Yeah, I'm going to be installing this plugin myself this evening / tomorrow morning. I've got a team that are asking me to help them how to get stuff done quicker. So I'm going to be playing with this tool for the next few days. Yeah. And I will be writing about it 100%. Any other questions? We don't have to stay to the top of the hour. Once we don't have any more questions, we will shut down this session. I see no more questions in the chat. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending the session. There's a lot of stuff, I promise you. I've been hearing about flow metrics for so long, and I still have to sit on it and reread every single time. Thank you very much, Louis. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I see Mark clapping there. Thank you very much. We will send the recording to everybody that's registered and everybody that has joined, so you can watch again in your own time. There is so much to keep learning. I mean, almost everyone here, I believe, an agile coach, Scrum Master, and we teach continuous learning. So please, this is my charge to you guys, to keep developing yourself, keep pushing those boundaries to learn more about these tools and helping our teams bring value to the customers of our organizations. On that note, I say, have a good evening, afternoon, morning, and then I think the next session we run this once every quarter. We were doing every month, but we didn't get enough people. So we started doing once every quarter. Hopefully we'll bring someone end of December, I believe, sometime there, to share some ideas as well. A different topic, I'm hoping, and then we'll be in touch. Thank you very much. My name is Sam again, and I look forward to seeing you in one of our future sessions. Have a good afternoon, evening, morning. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Louis. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Tina.